Hey, what's up guys? Doug and Josh here from Lumen Brothers. We are taking on a brand new historic rewire here in downtown Frederick, Maryland, and wanted to walk you through the process of what this is, what a historic rewire entails, why we do things the way we do it, and if you yourself were thinking about embarking on a project like this, what you can expect.
So what we have here is, these are artifacts of an old wiring system, and this is what actually gives this system its name, knob and tube. You always hear knob and tube wiring. So that's a knob, that is a tube. And here you can actually see them like installed. These wires would run between them, but the knobs are installed on the studs or in the joist bays to hold the wires. Tubes exist for the wires to pass through wood framing members. Now, actually, a lot of people will tell you it's not really illegal to leave it, and that is true, at least in our jurisdiction, but it's not necessarily a great idea. It's a completely ungrounded system, and where you really run into issues is this was installed in the early 1900s. The home had no insulation. Later on, especially in the 1970s, customers would want to insulate the home. And so what they would do is they would go in the attic, they would go in the walls, and they would spray insulation into the space. And this stuff is not rated to be in direct contact with insulation. It's not good. But yeah, here's our little artifacts. We like to save these. A lot of homeowners like to have a little piece of the history of their wiring in their house. So that's what we have going on here. These are for the homeowner to hang on to. The hardest part of doing these rewires in these old homes is 95% of the time people are trying to save the plaster, save as much of the plaster as they can and keep it intact. It's a lot of work to remove it and a lot of work to repair it. And so we're aware of that, but we have to get our wires to select places in the house. One of the ways we do that on the first floor, because we're kind of sandwiched by finished spaces, is right along here. You can see I have marked out for what we call a channel. And what that's gonna let us do, we're gonna cut a swath of plaster out, and that's gonna let us drill past all of the ceiling joists. We're gonna go from this box up to the center of this room using that. We're gonna go from here to outside. It's gonna let us do a handful of different locations and wire runs. And at first glance, there can be a lot of shock to a homeowner to see that much plaster getting removed. But it's actually the most effective way to do it. It's nice, it's clean, straight lines, and anyone who repairs plaster or drywall, it's far easier for them to put new pieces in, skim coat it, and paint it. But it can be a lot to walk into a project and see this much of your ceiling getting cut out.
When we're wiring a historic room and we are bringing it up to current modern codes, there are things that we have to do in order to get wires where they need to go. This is a great example for you because here you see a couple different things. Number one, we've got this hole open pretty large. And the reason we did that is you've got a number of things going on behind the wall here. In a modern home, you're gonna have your studs and they're gonna be covered by drywall. And that's pretty much the extent of it, some plastic boxes in there. In this home, what we found today when we were opening up these holes is we found these horizontal studs or pieces of lumber that were placed horizontally between the studs. A lot of times that can be called a fire break. Could be various reasons, structural support of the wall. Who knows exactly why they did it? I'm sure there are people out there that do. But for our purposes, we need to work around it because what we need to do is we need to get new wires to the switch location, the light location above, and all the outlets in each one of these rooms. We've got 100-year-old horsehair plaster to work with. We've got wooden lath behind it, and now we've got these horizontal structures to get through as well. So that requires us to open up a little bit more of the plaster here because we're gonna have to drill holes to get wires from the attic above down to these locations. This is also a good example. You can see here, this is a really good one. This, you might be wondering what in the world is going on there. This is an old fish tape. And what this shows us is that once upon a time, there were electricians who did their very best to get wires into place without opening the plaster. And they abandoned this fish tape in here, and here it lives today. It's not until we open the wall that we find it. But also in this case, you see a great example of one of our knobs for the knob and tube wiring. You see the wire coming up into this box. This is an old version of knob and tube wiring. It's got this really strange insulation on it that was kind of turn of the century technology back then that we're gonna do away with. Old metal boxes. And this is just some of the stuff that lives inside your walls in these old homes. And these are the things that we have to kind of work around, sometimes get out of our way in order just to get wires where they go. So when you're doing a project like this, you've got to keep in mind that it's always kind of a one step forward, two step backwards process, because we aren't sure what we're going to run into in the walls. You know, is it still original from, in this case, the early part of the 1900s? Have people come in on the back end and abandoned fish tapes in the wall? What sort of things are we going to run into? So a lot of times we don't know till we start opening the walls. We try to minimize the holes as much as possible, as Josh was mentioning, because it just, the plaster repair on the back end is another endeavor that the homeowner will have to take on. But in some cases, we just have to, you know, we're working with what we have here. And in this case in particular, we've got to solve for X, and X is this horizontal stud in the wall. In the process of rewiring an old home, a historic home, a lot of times what you're going to run into is there are these framing issues. In older homes, the exterior walls were not always framed, meaning there's brick past this plaster, but there are no interior studs to create an interior cavity the same way there are studs in the interior cavity of this interior wall. So these exterior walls, they're just plaster right on the brick. So there's no place to really put a box inside the wall. And as you see here, this is one thing that you can do is they manufacture surface mounted boxes and conduit called wire mold. And somebody ran wire and conduit on the outside of the house and popped it through the wall here. And that's one thing you can do. But a lot of people, this client in particular, they don't like the look of the wire mold boxes because they do protrude. You've got boxes that will extend out. They're not flush with the wall. And so in those cases, and in this case, we've got to solve that problem. You'll see down here, there was also a box that was recessed into the wall. What they did is before they set this baseboard, they chiseled the brick out behind here. And so we'd like to get new wires back to this location. And we've got plaster on brick in this room. And so what we are requesting here is you'll see this little strip of tape that says remove on this baseboard. We're gonna pull this baseboard. We're gonna have the client work with us to have this baseboard pulled. And we're gonna channel, similar to how they did that here in this brick, along the wall behind this baseboard. And what that will do is it will allow the client to ideally have less plaster to patch on the back end because this baseboard is just gonna go right back over that surface. So you've just gotta try to be creative and find little tricks that minimize plaster patching on the back end, allow for an effective install, and allow you to have some way to chisel that brick out behind here, because we're gonna have other spots in this house where we've got to cut fresh holes into the baseboards, and we're gonna have to have them removed so that we can chisel and get our wire behind there too. Pretty tricky. This is kind of a physical example of what wire mold conduit would look like on your wall. Now this is really common in old houses. You'll see this conduit, you know, to these surface mounted boxes all the time, all over the place. It's very common, but aesthetically, it's not something that everybody's into. And so we can either employ this technique to surface mount the wire and minimize plaster, or we can start diving into removing baseboards, opening plaster, things like that.
So this is This is pretty typical of a old electrical service. I would guesstimate this is 1960s. It's newer than the old screw-in glass fuses, so that's good. But this is pretty standard. It's up real high. It's convenient, right behind this pipe, and you can just see there's kind of a real mismatch of all the wires coming out of this thing. This is the heart of the electrical system. We want to redo this. We're bringing all our new, lines in here. There's not really good space for this, so we're going to replace this thing with a larger 200 amp main breaker, 42 amp or 42 space panel. It's going to be much more clean, fresh, up to date. You figure if this is from the 60s, what's that make it? 60 years old. So but we'll lower it as well. This pipe is actually getting removed. This is part of an old boiler system. Part of modern code, we can't have that here. It's a clearance issue. A lot of times we find customers will purchase a new home in the area and they'll be told by a home inspector or somebody who looks at the house that it's been completely rewired. And we'll get in there later and realize that's not the case. Down here in a basement or in an attic, it's unfinished, so it's really easy for someone to run new wires down here and cut all the knob and tube out. But what'll happen is they won't want to mess with the middle of the house where there's finished plaster, so they'll leave all that. And what you'll get here, we have a newer piece of wire right here. I say newer, this is probably 1960s, but newer, and it's spliced onto knob and tube wires where the knob and tube wires go up into the remainder of the house. Now this is pretty blatant, pretty obvious, but sometimes it'll be even more subtle. They'll actually set a junction box here and cover these and then have a new piece of wire coming into it. So it's very common. People will spend a lot of money on a new house, say, oh, it's been completely rewired, and then we have to give them the bad news that that's not the case. So there's an easy way to detect that. Typically on the first floor, if you open up a plate for a wall switch, you can look in there and we can see if that's indeed new wiring. But to buy a new home under the idea that it's been completely rewired, to find out that you might have to make a massive upgrade because it wasn't the case, that can be kind of a bummer.